Eric Cedillo joins us right now for the law offices of Eric Cedillo. We thought we'd bring him on. He's an expert when it comes to immigration law. He's been working on this issue of refugee and immigration from Syria and what the challenges are. Hey, Eric, we've got a bunch of questions. Let's dive right into the top one. We see these governors across the country saying, "Hey, our state's not going to accept these Syrian refugees." Do they have the authority to do that?
I don't believe they have the legal authority to deny access to their states by these refugees. That's, of course, within the purview of the federal government. But they can make it pretty difficult for them to come to the state by not cooperating, dictating to their Department of Health and Human Services not to cooperate with the federal government, and they can make it more difficult. But as far as actual legal authority to deny access, I don't believe they have that.
What are their concerns? Why did they want to refuse the Syrian refugees? Other than the obvious security reasons, are there other issues?
Well, I think that's the big one. I think that is the biggest consideration. I think that all of us should have that we need to be careful about who we're allowing into the country, but with that, taking into consideration the need for a good vetting process and making that determination along those factors. But I think that's the biggest one. Certainly, that there be security concerns.
What would happen to a state that meets them at the border, at the airport, at the train station, saying, you're not getting off here, turn around? What happens to the state?
I don't think they can do that. I think, of course, the federal government might have something to say about that. We've seen it in the past. Certainly, the desegregation that occurred early on, their National Guard troops might need to be escorting these individuals. I seriously doubt that it would ever, rise to that level. You've got what President Obama is suggesting, 10,000 over the next 12 months, and you've got 50 states in which to place them. I think the 31 or so that have said they're going to deny access, it probably won't be the high targets that the president would probably place them at. So, realistically, what they've done in terms of saying that they want to deny access, they may have been successful in the other states that say we would welcome them. Might be a more a better place for the president to place individuals. So that's certainly a consideration.
So if our governor said you're not coming to Texas and put up, I'm trying to picture the fight that would occur. And they said, no, I don't care what Obama says. We're not going to let them in here. Are you talking military force here?
Well, I would hope not. And, of course, the phone calls they had yesterday, I think that's what they were trying to do is to kind of make sure that they quell all those fears and have everybody understand that. I seriously doubt the president would force, if he had no other alternative and all 50 states were saying this isn't going to happen and he decided he was going to place them, then that might be another issue. But I don't think they have the ability to do that. Of course, if they did, then the president, as our commander-in-chief, has control and command over our troops, certainly, and the National Guard, and hopefully it would never come to that. But if it did, then that might be a situation that might actually arise.
Attorney Eric Cedillo is with us right now. His specialty, immigration law. Eric, when you look at the makeup of refugees, do we have any idea of how many of these are fighting age men? How many of them are women? How many of them are children? Do we have any kind of numbers here yet?
Well, that's a good question. I think there's been about 11 million that have been displaced, 7 million within the country of Syria, and then about 4 million outside the country. What the numbers suggest is that half of these are children, and that's a big consideration. If you're talking about half of 11 million of them being children that have been displaced, and we're talking about taking in 10,000, I think a real easy protocol might be that we take in children and women, initially, and that might quell some concerns about, the age. The president has spoken that we won't do it along religious lines, but I think he has the authority to take into consideration age and other things like these folks can be women and children.
Sure. Hey, real fast, the relocation program in itself, how do they determine where they go? Are they looking for cultural things? Are they looking for relationships as far as family? How will they determine where these folks are divvied up?
Well, in all honesty, the Refugee Act of 1980 probably didn't contemplate that real strong possibility of terrorist activity among refugees. Refugees are the most highly vetted category of folks coming into the country and being resettled into the country. But certainly the president has the ability initially, or the act itself takes into consideration demographics, takes into consideration a population where additional Syrians may have been placed before to make them feel comfortable, certainly in situations that are more economically advantageous. They wouldn't place them in New York. It might be too expensive. So they look for, of course, bigger states. Texas and California are prime examples of that. So the president has a lot of leeway. The actual agency has a lot of leeway in terms of where they can place individuals once they provide them with refugee status.
I wonder if the president will make it political. In other words, okay, let's take these refugees and we'll put them in the Republican states and not the Democratic states.
I would seriously doubt that. You know, you've got to always remember that, politics aside, the president, has an obligation to the states. The states have an obligation to the president. Hopefully that there's a respect for those offices, and they take into consideration. I think the call that was heard yesterday in terms of trying to get everyone along the same line, quell some fears, and do some other things. You're seeing hopefully that ability to kind of work with the states. There wouldn't want to be any forced action. It just doesn't make sense. So I doubt that President Obama would do that, but certainly. A lot of that may have to do with what the governors actually do. You talk about stopping them at the border. That would be something that would be hopefully quite out of the ordinary and wouldn't happen. But if it did, you never know.
Eric, we got one more question for you. I want to do it after we check traffic. Eric Cedillo is with us right now. He's an attorney focusing on immigration law. All right, here's the big question. These folks are brought into the United States. What is their status when they are here? Are they automatically citizens? Are they free to move about the country? What's their status?
Well, quite honestly, they're refugees seeking asylum. So once they're brought into the United States, they have a legal status. They have a legal right to be here. They're provided a Social Security number relatively quickly. And, the Office of Refugee Resettlement provides them with, an opportunity for locating contractors like nonprofit groups that help them resettle, find jobs, things of that nature. Then they have an opportunity to apply for, legal permanent residence. And once you do that, after a period of time, eventually they could apply for citizenship. But that is the purpose and the timing behind the vetting process. You bring them in with that potential possibility for becoming citizens at some point. As far as their mobility, there's no restrictions in terms of where they can go. If they come in and are placed in Texas, they can, if they didn't feel real welcome, they might go to another state. Again, you're talking about people who don't have really anything. So it's not like they have the ability, unless they can work with these nonprofits or states, to relocate.
Wow, that's amazing. And there's no way you can vet them completely and be sure that none of them are terrorists.
Well, quite honestly, what the president may have the authority to do is to treat it a little bit differently. He's got the ability to create regulations that the Department of Health and Human Services would need to comply by, and if he wants to treat the Syrian refugees that he brings in with a little bit more scrutiny, that could be a possibility. Congress has talked about putting together a committee to start looking at perhaps the modification of the Refugee Act of 1980 that could potentially put some additional consideration or conditions on the refugee status for Syrians. But yeah, it's a relatively fluid and new thing. We're dealing with the Refugee Act of 1980 that perhaps didn't contemplate the current world that we're living in.
All right. Thank you, Eric, for being on with us this morning. Maybe answered a few questions.